or my taste or anybody's pleasure or taste is worth more than the entire life of somebody else is ludicrous and it's immoral.
Towards the end of the year, Plant-Based News' World Plant Milk Day was launched, and the dairy industry began its own counter hashtag.
I'm Abby Reader, and I'm proud to be a dairy farmer.
We're the Evans family, and we are proud of dairy.
Proud of Dairy achieved only a handful of submissions, while World Plant Milk Day trended all day. The fate of the two hashtags a fitting metaphor for the competing forces, and a sign of increasing awareness.
And I'll tell you what, there's nothing happy about the dairy industry.
Calves that are born into this industry, particularly the male calves, are considered wastage.
The calves are taken from their mothers a few hours after birth to be slaughtered and processed.
And we warn this report may distress some viewers.
Conditions on two Invercargill dairy farms have been described as catastrophic.
So we have this rampant sexual abuse.
A cow has to become pregnant in order to produce milk, and that they become these baby-making machines.
We've done investigations at so many dairy factory farms across the country and have documented mother cows bellowing for days.
All the cruelty in the dairy industry, the forced impregnation, the separating babies from their mothers, the slaughtering of the baby animals, the killing of the mothers as well, and the exploitation of their reproductive system, all of this cruelty and violence and oppression. And what's it for? Just so we can have a little bit of cow's milk in our cereal, so we can make a piece of cheese to fit with all the other ingredients on our sandwich.
It's not about respecting me as a vegan. It's about respecting the life of somebody who feels like me, someone who's capable of the same physical feelings that I have.
I'd like all people to look at the fundamental core of ethics and morality, which is treat others the way you want to be treated.
If we were telling people what they already knew, then we wouldn't be doing our job as activists. We need to tell the world what they don't already know. And what they don't know is that humane meat is a lie.
And our aim really is for total animal liberation. We're abolitionists, so we want to end all animal exploitation, whether that's for food, clothing, animal testing, or animals in entertainment.
Throughout 2017, it was revealed industry representatives carefully watched vegan activists, recording their speeches and compiling documents on how to combat advocacy. Press releases were published in an attempt to discredit their arguments, and FBI agents raided animal shelters in an attempt to intimidate animal rights activists.
It's absolutely true that most senior counterterrorism officials would be appalled by by this recent conduct of the FBI, and to pursue these animal activists instead of the people who are actually abusing the animals is actually a massive waste of resources.
I think we'll continue to see a lot of resistance from animal agriculture in this country. This is a $250 billion industry. A lot of people's livelihoods are dependent on it.
Anytime animals are being tortured, follow the money.
We're up against a $1 trillion industry.
We are living in a world that's deeply steeped in carnism.
The meat industry tries to suppress us.
It's a powerful industry we're going up against. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on lobbying. They spend, I think, millions of dollars on advertising.
You know, there are so many subliminal, manipulative techniques that are used by the advertising industry to encourage people to eat meat. They associate it with social status, with family values, with sex appeal, with masculinity, with upward mobility, with all these things that it has nothing to do with.
Because for all of their money and for all of their political influence, we have one thing they will never have. We have the truth.
Disproportion between that little bit of extra pleasure you might get from eating meat and the phenomenal amount of destruction required to produce it should surely commend it to anyone as a stupid thing to do.
If you spent 1 minute in their shoes, if you knew what that was like, I know you wouldn't do it.
Just look into the eyes of an animal who's suffering, who's about to be brutalized and torn to pieces on the slaughter line.
And stuffed with all kinds of carcinogens, the growth hormones, the steroids, the Prozac, the antibiotics, stuffed with that shit.
In every movement in history, movements have grown and changed the world when people have the confidence to speak truth to power.
You really can't be an environmentalist and not be vegan. You really can't be a feminist and not be vegan.
And if you look at human history, there have been a number of institutions and behaviors that we now look back on and are appalled by.
If you look at everybody in the history of making a change in the world, they were verbally
and in much earlier times physically abused.
The suffragists who were fighting for the women's right to vote, they were seen as hysterical, anti-males, you know, and it's a way of shooting the messenger. If you shoot the messenger, you don't have to take seriously the implications of their message.
100 billion animals made to be born into suffering to destroy our planet and to be the worst karmic disaster in the history of the world, reenacted every year, is unconscious behavior.
Animals can't speak for themselves. They're so defenseless, and they're the most innocent, vulnerable beings on Earth.
And I think at some point we're going to be looking back on today and saying, how could we have supported the system that was so harmful? And it's really basically habits. We're creatures of habit. We're also social animals. So if everybody around us is doing something, we start doing it, often without thinking about it.
It's blatantly obvious now that we do not need to consume animals to be healthy. We'll be far healthier without them.
She got her life back. You can't put that into words.
We like to think of ourselves as moral and kind and just, and extending that circle to include animals, I think, is the ethical calling of our time.
So we need to have that bold vision and say, you know what? I think I want to create a world, I know I want to create a world where every single slaughterhouse in this world has been replaced by a sanctuary.
And this is my number one goal, and my number one goal will be, and it will be achieved, to end animal factory farming. 100% it will end before I die.
So we've personally invested in a company doing it for meat, a company doing it for leather, a company doing it for gelatin, a company doing it for milk proteins. There are other companies doing it for eggs, for fish, even for spider silk. We think it's going to be one of the most impactful and one of the most profitable technology revolutions that the world's ever seen.
ما يذوقون اللحم يفرحون الآن الناس عندنا كثير من الأطباء يقول احذر اللحم واحذر الشحم.
I think that the oppression of animals is the gateway drug to oppressing humans.
If you put a rabbit and an apple in a crib, the baby will eat the apple and pet the rabbit. And what we do is we try to toughen boys up and girls, and we try to make them strong by making them callous and unfeeling, and we indoctrinate and condition them into being cruel and giving them the terrible values that what you drive or what you wear or what your little totems are more important than kindness and compassion.
And I do think those scales are going to tip at some point so that veganism becomes the dominant ideology.
There's so many new campaigns, there's so much new activism happening. The Save movement is growing, more people getting to these slaughterhouses and showing people these animals. I think that's one of the most powerful things happening right now. The Cube of Truth by Anonymous for the Voiceless is growing in city after city after city.
It is so amazing to be a witness to the growth and development of this cruelty-free world, especially in the beauty world.
I talk to some people now who look back on, for example, Ringling Brothers Circus closure, and they say, oh, it was inevitable. It wasn't inevitable, but nor was it impossible. Nothing about what we're doing is inevitable nor impossible.
By the end of 2017, there were a number of promising developments. Ag-gag bills, designed to cover up the reality of factory farming, were declared unconstitutional in several states in the US. The charity Viva crowdfunded vegan cinema ads in the UK. A political think tank called for a vote to make factory farming illegal in Switzerland, and animal rights marches broke record numbers all over the world.
The easiest thing that any one of us can do to help animals is simply leave them off our plates and stop paying for their abuse.
Online access to information about how to live vegan is more accessible, with new recipe guides and resources coming out all the time.
Groundbreaking media, using social media, YouTube, Facebook, and video to get the word out is so important.
As young people predominantly get their news from these platforms now, a new generation is being created in the biggest health, environmental, and ethical movement ever to exist.
What's exciting about that is it shows the generational shift.
Even people perceived to be against the new way of thinking began to speak out, including Unilever president Amanda Sourry. In addition, supermarkets redesigned meat aisles to encourage consumers to buy less meat. Tesco's hired a director of plant-based innovation, the first position of its kind, and the German Ministry of Environment also made changes.
The German Ministry of Environment bans meat at all of its official functions.
In addition, media outlets like Unilad published articles. The Guardian listed meat and dairy alternatives as the #1 megatrend to fight climate change. Car companies such as Tesla ditched leather interiors, Restaurant chains like Pret a Manger expanded their veggie stores, and sports clubs like Forest Green Rovers went vegan. Veganism is no longer viewed as a fringe lifestyle choice. It is a moral framework searing into the consciousness of huge numbers of people. The question now is, what will you bring to 2018?